Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Others will join in as they arrive. We will let them into the room. But thank you all for joining us today for this Grantseeker workshop for our Animating Infrastructure Grant Program. My name is Michelle Bailey. I am the Senior Program Manager at the Vermont Arts Council, and I administer our public art programs, and I'm the Accessibility Coordinator. This event today is being live captioned by White Coat Captioning. To view the captions during the event, just click on the closed caption button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Also, you may view the captions in full page text by clicking on the link that I just put into the chat, where you can view it in a separate browser if that's helpful. So I'm delighted today to talk with you about the Animating Infrastructure Grant Program. First, I would like to start off with a land acknowledgement, however, and we really wish to acknowledge that in Vermont, we are within the unceded territory of the original inhabitants of Endakina, the Abenaki, and in the southwest portion, the Mohican people. Their traditional and ongoing relationships with the land call us to learn to be better caretakers of the land as well. We offer respect to their ancestors, their elders, and their relations, past, present, and emerging. The first part of this workshop will be an overview of the grant program and a few application tips. We'll then pause for some questions and then move on to some slides that I've developed to help you kind of brainstorm and vision potential public art projects in your community, as well as a little bit about how to find an artist. Many of the images that you'll see in the first part of this presentation are projects that were previously funded with Animating Infrastructure funds. So through this program, we help communities to demonstrate the positive impact of art in helping communities meet their goals of livability, walkability, safety, economic vitality, and community vibrancy, and to support the creation of unique infrastructure projects where function and art are one and the same. We want to support communities in creating landmark pieces of art that are unique, connect to the community, and have the potential to attract people to that community or to activate a specific space. We do have a few definitions that I think might be helpful for you all to go over, which I'll do that right now, but they're also in the guidelines. And this is just for the purposes of this grant program. We define infrastructure as infrastructure that includes community facilities and services such as buildings, trails, water or sewer systems, roads and parks, parking lots, vacant or empty spaces, and more. Functional components of infrastructure such as sidewalks, railings, bridges, creative wayfinding, stairs, gateways, tree grates, fences, lightworks, trellises, water fountains, and more in the built and or the natural environment have the potential for artistic enhancement that creates unique places where people want to live, work, visit, or play. And then we define public art in a way that it can take many art forms. It includes works of art intended for long-term visibility, 5 to 15 years or more, like sculpture, murals, tile projects, mixed media, photography, digital works, crafts, integrated architectural or landscape architectural elements, and more. And it can also include temporary installations of 1 month up to 5 years of visual art or experiential art that helps to activate public spaces. The art should be site specific, meaning that it's created in response to the place and the community in which it resides. It is free and accessible to everyone and often tells a unique story or shares the history of the place and or of its people. And art that is purely aesthetic or experiential, is eligible, but it should address a community goal or issue as well. Also, cross-sector partnerships are really important in this program, meaning that you could, combine the work of arts and non-arts organizations or groups that are working together to achieve something together that they couldn't do alone. So within the Animating Grant Program, Animating Infrastructure Grant Program, we offer two different funding categories, and you'll need to select one or the other when you apply. The first one is a design grant, and these are for funds that may be used to conduct a process to select an artist or to work with an already identified artist for your public art project. And the grant should really support the artist's fees to design and or plan the artwork and to engage the community in that planning and design process. And those grants are a maximum of $5,000. The other category are what we call implementation grants. These funds are used to actually create, fabricate, and install the public art that has already been designed or planned for a community project. And those grants are up to $15,000. And you can, often communities have applied for the design grant the first year, worked on that over the course of the year in which the grant program is activities take place, and then come back the next year for a fabrication or implementation grant and to actually work to build it or to create it. Just because you get a design grant and complete it doesn't necessarily mean that you would get an implementation grant. It's still a competitive process. So, we would want you to apply just like everyone else, but you would have had at least the time through that design grant phase to really kind of work out what you want to do in your community. The grants don't require a match, and the only thing is 80% of those funds must be used to support and compensate the artists for their time, materials, supplies, expenses for the creation, design, or planning of that artwork. And then the remaining 20% of the grant funds can be used to support project management, community engagement, or other community outreach activities. And your proposed projects may be either permanent or temporary, as I said, both are eligible. And temporary art projects can have some experiential elements like events or community activities. And that could include performing arts or film or literary arts. It just depends on, what your community goal is that you're trying to reach with those. So next screen, what we do not fund is the purchase, lease, or exhibition of pre-existing artwork or additions. We're really looking for commissioning and creating new works in the community. We don't fund any ongoing operational expenses of the applicant, organization, or partners. We don't fund capital improvements that aren't directly related to the public artwork. The purchase of land or property and or the design of artwork that will not be publicly accessible or visible. So who may apply? Any Vermont 501c3 nonprofit organization, educational institutions, or municipalities may apply. However, many communities have groups that may be working together on a collaborative process, and they may not have a tax exempt status. So it is possible to use a fiscal agent, and a fiscal agent may be and must be another 501c3 charitable nonprofit that is incorporated in Vermont. And all applicants have to get what we call a unique entity ID or UEI number from the government. We do have instructions and a little informational link on our website if you want to find out more about how to do that. Many organizations, this has been around for a while, so many organizations already have them, but if you don't have one, you might want to start working on that now. You can do that at any time, and there is a link and information on our website. And also individual artists are not eligible to apply. However, I have found that many individual artists are actually part of those community groups and may be working together collaboratively. And so it could be that as part of the whole group, there's, an artist that has kind of come forward with an idea, but it's a really, we're looking for projects that are really kind of community driven, and that artist can be part of it. And but you need to get a fiscal agent. So the timeline for applying this year is that we ask for our project pitch, which is due April 1st. And that pitch, I'll get into that a little bit more in the next few slides. But that's just kind of an opportunity for you to pitch an idea to us. And then by May 16th, we will have had a panel review all those ideas, and they will then identify maybe 6 to 8 or 8 to 10, depending on the numbers, applications to actually develop a full proposal. And so you will get notification by May 16th, and then you'd have about a month to develop that full proposal. And it would be due June 16th, and then our panel will meet, and then we will notify everyone by August 1st whether they've been awarded a grant or not. And that would be for projects that begin September 1st of 2025 and end by August 31st of 2026. And then we do require final reports on all of our grants, so that would be due on September 30th. So let's see. A little bit more about the project pitch. When you're putting together the pitches, we don't require at the time that you have a budget in there. You don't need the budget. You don't need to have if you're applying for a design grant, that is, you don't need to have the artist selected, because part of what you can apply for in this design phase is for your community group to put out a call to artists or to identify your artists in some way, and to pay artists an honorarium if there is a process that you're using where you're narrowing down to some finalists. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but those artist honorariums for the selection process can be part of that, the funds, and also to pay the artist for their time to work with the community to design it. And then, as I mentioned, any community engagement activities and project management shouldn't be more than 20% of that grant amount. If you do have an artist that you're already planning to work with, that's fine. You can include the name of that artist and their website and information, but we don't require it or a budget or even letters of support and things at the time of application. So, but at the end of the grant period, if you're doing a design grant, we would want you to submit with your final report the designs, which could be drawings or models with specific materials and the budget outlined, a timeline for your fundraising, and the plan for fabricating, installing, any site preparation, maintenance requirements if it's visual art, those kinds of things. We'd want you to have a pretty well formalized plan that you would submit with that final report. So just to make sure you understand that's part of that process and part of that final report. And then you can use those final designs, can be used by the community to raise the necessary funds to compensate artists for that next phase of actually making that work. And like I said, this could include animating infrastructure grant funds, but it could also be crowdfunding opportunities or other funding sources. Yes, so that's one way to kind of get yourself in line with the specifics of what you want to do in your community, and then you can fundraise for that. So for an implementation grant, those grants are up to $15,000. If you are awarded an implementation grant, those funds may be used to support the fabrication or creation and installation of a previously designed or planned project. Basically, you're kind of ready to go when you apply. And again, same as the design grants, the project management can be 20% of the grant funds used. So if you are invited to submit a full proposal, applications in this category will be asked to submit that completed design and or plan and provide all the specifics of the timeline for the fabrication and creation or installation and completion of the artwork. And it will ask for information about the materials and how durable and safe they are, and the timeline, and then your plans for fundraising if the grant doesn't cover the full amount of the project, which for some of these larger projects that we've even seen in these images so far, often they've been much more, or at least a little bit more than the 15,000 that we have granted out. And so there's often a need to raise additional funds. All right, so additional consideration will be given to also, for unique opportunities for the integration of public art into the infrastructure. So there is a question in there, in the application that says, why is this important to your community now? There's the timing piece. There's also maybe it's a unique opportunity because of the type of project it is. There's lots of ways it could be a unique opportunity, but we do want to hear about those. And then we hope that the project will relate to the community and the place specifically in some way. So those are always very compelling things to include in your application. Next up is the criteria. So for the project pitch grants, we are looking at projects that demonstrate that they have potential for a clearly defined public art project that helps meet community goals. This is weighted at 50% of the review, and that can be through the detailed description of the community, the site, and the public art project, clearly defined vision and specific goals and community outcomes, and compelling reasons why the project is important now, as I mentioned before. We're looking for projects with strong leadership with potential cross-sector partnerships, a clear description of the organization and leadership with relevant experience, and potential or committed cross-sector partners that have been identified. This is going to be about 40% of the review. And when I say identified, or whether they're potential or committed, at the point of the project pitch portion of the application, you don't necessarily have to have communicated with all of your partners. I think it's a good idea to at least have a conversation with some potential partners to make sure that they would be on board if you were invited to do a full proposal, but we don't require letters of support or anything with this application right now. But I would encourage people to have a conversation at least with a potential partner or groups if you have some there, or if you have some that are already committed because you're a little further along, that's great. I just identify that in the narrative. And then thought about clear and inclusive potential for community engagement. That's a big part of this program as well, engaging the community in whether it's into the artist selection or the design and or the making of the art. That community engagement can happen at different phases or different places in your project, but we do want to hear about any potential that you might have there for that community engagement. I do encourage you to take a look at the help text that's included in the application preview document that we've provided online. Also, that same text is included in the online application and it gives you a little more information and tips about the kinds of things we're looking for in the answers to those questions. I just encourage you to take a look at those. So let's see. In the project pitches, like I said, they're very short. The first thing we're going to need is some applicant information, the usual organization and contact information, etc. We want to hear about the potential location or site for the artwork. And we may not, that may alter a bit later on if you're invited to submit a full proposal, but we'd like you to have a pretty good idea of where you would like something to happen. This is a place-based application for public arts. So what is the space or the location for that potential artwork? The narrative questions that we ask you to address really include a community description and the infrastructure project that might be outlined, goals of the community and the vision for what the artwork would do in the community. What are those specifics? Are the goals about revitalization? Are your goals around public safety or walkability? And how do you anticipate that this art project would help you to meet those goals? Again, why is this important at this time? Is there maybe a streetscape project that's being done now, and the integration of artwork into that streetscape has to happen now because the work is going to be starting in the next summer or a couple of summers, and you really want to have it planned out and think about that? Or are you hoping to attract people to the site and or reactivate an unused storefront or abandoned spaces? Was your community impacted by a recent disaster and the community needs to focus on healing and revitalization? So there's a lot of different ways that these projects can meet various types of community goals. Then the leadership and cross-sector partners, who are the potential or committed partners. And then, as I mentioned, those potential community engagement activities. In thinking about the art project, what are those potential opportunities in the design? Is the artist going to take and gather input or have a community art process that they use to gather ideas? Is it in the artist selection process, in the art making, or in the use of the space after the artwork is installed through planned events and activities? There's lots of different ways you can think about that. And then, as I mentioned before, you don't have to have the artist selected at the time you put in your design grant if that's the one you're going through. But do include it if you have it because you have already selected it. You don't necessarily have to do a call to artists. If you have an artist in your community that you want to work with, we don't require that, but it is one way that communities do, gather a lot of artists who might be a good fit for their program. And then for the implementation grant, again, include the name of the artist and the concept for the public artwork, even if it's just a simple concept at the project pitch phase. So it helps our committee to have a good idea of what you're thinking about. So for media, we do ask for samples of images, and those images should be there should be up to 7 of them. Doesn't have to be a full 7, but at least I think 4 maybe is the minimum, but up to 7. We'd like to see one of the site, as in a potential proposed site for an artwork. A map is sometimes helpful, even if it's just a screenshot from a Google map, to have an understanding of where this is in your community in terms of the site, and get an understanding of the broader community context. An understanding of the community. So maybe if it's in your downtown or a village, a little snapshot of the village and the community, again, helps to provide context to the committee members who are reviewing this. And then what I find the panel finds really helpful is a vision for that project or your project ideas to date. Sometimes people will do just searches on the internet and say, oh, there's some really cool projects that look like something we might want to do in our community. And so just thinking about that helps to give our committee members a sense of the ideas that are floating around in your head, and that what's your vision for where this is going to go. And so it may change once you get to your full proposal, or as you work on a design process with an artist, it may alter, and that's okay. But they just would like to know and get a sense of what is your vision for this space with the art. And then, as I mentioned, for the implementation grants, you will need to, if you do a full proposal, you'll have to have all the information, but at the time of applying for the implementation grant, we'll need at least a sketch or an idea of what it is you're going to apply for that implementation. I also want to say that we do allow an optional video of up to about 3 minutes with a narration that shows and speaks to the proposed site, the vision for the public art, and how it might help meet those community goals. This can be done by informally walking around, just speaking into your camera on your phone and device. It does not need to be highly polished or edited video. Just be sure that the audio and visuals are clear so we can understand it. But the applicants who have done this in the past, I will say the panelists have found it very helpful to kind of get a little better understanding. It's almost like a little online interview with the applicant. So, but again, it's not required, but I just have found that it has been helpful. And then what you should do is, if you do it on your phone, then just upload it to a YouTube or Vimeo site, and then you can link it to the online application in our system. So That's what a lot of people have done. So we welcome all project ideas, um, but we do list in the application guidelines that we're interested in some specific areas of focus if you are considering something like this. And that's projects where art is integrated into functional components of the infrastructure. And I'll get into a little more of that later on when I do a little visioning session with you. But we're also looking for that community engagement where projects are fostering connection among people with diverse, either financial or educational, health, employment, or social resources, people with diverse abilities or from diverse races, cultures, genders, or ages, those kinds of um, interconnections and fostering connections with diverse populations or underrepresented populations would be really great to see. Or projects that use funds to integrate an artist in residence in the community to address a specific place-based community goal or challenge. So, there have been a few projects around the country where a community has taken an artist and paid that artist to basically spend time in the community and kind of think about those community goals. Again, place-based, it should be, we've identified this place. It's a vacant lot or a storefront or a building that's not been used or an open field that your community is trying to figure out what to do with that, or if there's some kind of planning opportunity. Um, Engaging with an artist to kind of be in your community and work with that community could be a potential project. And then also, we're looking for projects from towns or communities who have not received funding from this program. We've funded projects in about 29 different communities around the state, and we do have a public art map on our website that includes some of those animating infrastructure grants that are completed. It's not a complete list quite yet, but you can also just look at our recent grantees list and look at the other towns, and you might even know if your community has received a grant or not. And also, if you want to just call me, I can let you know too. That can be a possible way to find out the information. So let's see. Also, sometimes communities are interested in transportation related projects. And if those transportation projects are on state controlled highways, state park and ride facilities, state owned rail trails, or state airports, it would require permission from VTrans to make sure that the project is going to fit within their safety considerations and other things that might be happening at the site. So there is an art installations on state transportation facilities guidance document at the Vermont Agency of Transportation. And this Matthew Arancio is the contact person for that. If you do, and if you're not sure if it's state owned or not, you can also reach out to him and see. But a lot of projects that we do are more local projects. But just wanted to let you know we are partnering with them, and if you need to reach out to them, I can help you with that as well. So, all right. Now I'm just going to move on for a brief moment to the section about our online application grants. So we do ask that all of your applications be submitted through our online portal. If you are new to the Arts Council, you will need to kind of set up your username and password and an account. But if you click on, when you go to our online application portal, and you'll see in the right-hand navigation column, there's the guidelines, the project pitch overview, and some additional project ideas. I'm going to walk through some visuals on the screen today, but there's more ideas there. If you want to click on some examples there, you can read a few there. But if you click on the Apply Online button there, it will take you into the portal. And like I said, if you have already applied for grants through the Arts Council, you can just add your username and password that you've been using for other grants and go in and then find that FY26 Animating Infrastructure Grant. But if you are new to this and have not used our grant system or applied before, you will need to register, and you can do that by clicking on the left-hand side. There's a little register link at the bottom there that I circled. So you want to go in and just set up your username and account in the system. It sometimes will take a couple of days because our staff needs to review it, and if you do it on a weekend or during a busy time, it might take a couple of days. So I always encourage folks to do that. That's another thing that you can do right away if you haven't already, just to go in and set up your username and password in our system. So if you have any problems with that and need help registering or get signing in, or you're new to the system or have trouble uploading any documents or just navigating it anyway, I encourage you to reach out to Meredith Bell. She is our administrator of the grant system itself, and she can really help you with any technical issues about the system or issues in registering. If you have questions about the program itself and applying in terms of what your project is, I'm the one you would want to call. But if it's technical about the online grant system, I encourage you to contact Meredith. So, all right. I am going to pause here for a moment and see if anyone has any questions. I see there's some in there in the there's a question about stipends to artists who submit concepts for an RFP. Yes, we do support that practice, and it really does depend on the project. You know, we have a little sample where, I would at least do a few $100s. The more, the better. But I think that it might be, I'm happy to talk with you about anything like this in the context of your project. It really kind of depends a little bit on what you're asking them to do, or, the scale and scope of the project. But yes, I'm going to get into next the difference between what we call a request for qualifications versus a request for proposals, and kind of talk about the difference there. So I will get to that in a little bit more detail coming up. Could a building owned by a nonprofit qualify as infrastructure? Yes, absolutely. We just want to make sure that whatever project you're doing is visible and open and free to the public. So it could be a lobby in a building that's, it doesn't have to be open 24/7, but maybe it's a mural in a lobby that the public goes into, or something on the outside of the building that is visible, or in the, so yes, that certainly buildings do qualify as infrastructure. And we, like I said, we're pretty broad and loose in our definition of infrastructure. Another question: if you are forming a committee to review RFPs submitted by artists and select the artists to do the work, do you have to know who will be on the committee at the time of submitting a pitch for a design grant? You should at least have potential folks that you're thinking of. Again, it's pitch, so some of your partners, potential community members, even if you just indicate who you're going to represent, like a neighboring a neighbor who's adjoining the property, your partners, community members, community business. I think if you don't have the people identified, you should at least know kind of the representation you might like to have on a committee like that. And again, I'm happy to brainstorm with you and folks if you want to contact me at some point to think about that. And then if an organization has received operating support from the Arts Council, would they still be eligible for animating infrastructure? Yes. This grant does not disqualify operating grant recipients, so that's fine if you have received one of those, or any of the other grants too. The only thing is, if it's for the same project, like if you applied for an arts project grant and an animating infrastructure grant, and it was for the same project, we couldn't do that. but the operating grants are fine. And then where do funds from the Vermont Arts Council come from? Oh, do you anticipate any impact from the proposed changes to federal funding, especially regarding the DEIA? Right now, we are moving forward as planned with our grant programs. We have not changed or altered anything at this point. We do get about 40% of our funds from the National Endowment for the Arts, but we have not been given any specific guidance yet from the National Endowment for the Arts or others. And we feel pretty strongly about trying to kind of continue the work that we've been doing. And so that's where we are today. Our world is a little bit shifting around us. So I don't know what that will look like in the future, but for right now, we are moving forward as planned. So with 9 or 10 finalists, how many grants are available? I'm still waiting a bit on our budget final numbers for this program again, but I estimate anywhere from 4 to 8 projects. It's going to kind of depend on what comes in. If we had 10 $5,000 grants and, for the design grants and just 2 or 3 implementation grants, then, that's one scenario. But if we had most of the applications coming in for implementation, we might end up having to fund fewer if we fully fund. So it really kind of depends on the applications and then what the final budget number is. I'm hoping that we can fund in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 projects, which is why, we'll have a better sense of the numbers once we get to the end of the project pitch process, and then we'll know, I like to keep it so that if you're invited to do a full proposal, that you would at least have a 50% chance of getting something. So it will vary a bit. So, all right. Are there any other questions? I probably have time for one more. If anyone has anything you'd like to just unmute and ask me, that's fine. If not, I'll continue on. No? Okay. All right. I'm actually somebody has their mic is not muted. Maybe we could get it muted. I'm getting a little bit of feedback in here, so thank you. All right, so let's brainstorm a little bit about what a public art project might be in your community, with some visioning. So this is a project that we funded in Waterbury, the Waterbury Special. It's a train sculpture with the cars being representative of buildings in the Waterbury area, and it's at the roundabout in route two, round on my head. And, I wanted to also just share a little bit about what do we mean by creative placemaking. And when we talk about it here, we use this definition that was created a number of years ago by Ann Markison and Ann Nagadwa. And it's in creative placemaking, partners from public, private, nonprofit, and community sectors strategically shape the physical and social character of a neighborhood, town, city, or region around arts and cultural activities. Creative placemaking animates public and private spaces, rejuvenates structures and streetscapes, improves local business viability and public safety, and brings diverse people together to celebrate, to inspire, and to be inspired. And basically, it's creating interesting places where people and events and things want to happen. And then public art, I'm not really going to read through this too much because we have already talked about our definition of it. But as I mentioned, experiential art performances and festivals and things like that can be considered public art. And so we're kind of open to all of those things as long as those things aren't, we are really looking for ways that these experiential opportunities are reaching new spaces or places, and they're not just additional funding for something that's already happening in the community, but something that is really helping to reach a community goal. And when you do creative placemaking through public art, it demonstrates that this place is valued by the people that live and work here, and the people that live and work here are valued. It can enhance civic pride. Um, it can add value to your project by people, when they see themselves and their community reflected in their civic spaces, they are likely to have a sense of attachment that allows them to feel ownership and appreciation and respect. Public art supports social connections. It encourages civic and community engagement. It activates the imagination through storytelling and art to emphasize our shared humanity, allowing the individual to better understand and connect with strangers and neighbors alike. It can contribute to public health and belonging. Creating interesting, beautiful places provides incentives for people to get out, get physical activity, and it often reduces stress because people feel safer in their environments. And then, of course, it can stimulate economic development and encourage cultural tourism by attracting visitors to your site or your community, who will likely also visit another restaurant or a business or a lodging establishment when they're in the area. So when do you get engaged with an artist? Well, there's a lot of potential opportunities to do this. You can bring them in at various points within a process. So, and they can be large scale or small scale or temporary. It just really depends on your community and what you want to do. The first thing is, is your community conducting a planning process or a visioning for a space or a place, or thinking about your community values? Artists can engage people in art making activities that can get at their input into those community visioning and value things. So not everyone may want to participate in that Tuesday night, 7 p.m. sit down meeting in a town hall. But if you're doing a community plan or a town plan or an envisioning session, make it fun and people may participate more. How about inviting an artist to be a part of your planning team, or invite an artist to be an artist in residence in your community for a few weeks or months to do art space community activities or temporary art installations as a way to gather community input? Is there a vacant building or a vacant lot in your community? Is there a way you could gather community input on ways that your community might want to use that space? So you could do that through some temporary installations as well. Next up is the design process. Maybe you already know what the space is and you're working on designing a new building or a road or a park or whatever it might be. You can engage an artist with an architect, the planners, the engineers, or community members to incorporate unique artistic and design elements into that project. And this creates a lot more potential to integrate art into the functional components of a project. And it can potentially be a way to cut costs, because if you plan for it ahead of time, or if you have things already built into a budget, you're going to need, sidewalks and benches and fences and all that. You could perhaps use an artist to hire an artist to kind of create some unique infrastructure there. If there's a creation process in place, like you already have it planned and designed, and now you know that you want to include a mural on a wall or something, you can engage the community in the art making process, or just, that's when you're the kind of typical way we think about engaging an artist is through the art making itself. And then, of course, programming and activities in the space. Are there ways that you can activate those spaces with art installations? Just use your imagination. And again, this might be where having an artist to work with you to do some temporary installations in those places could be really great and activate the space and get people excited. So Gathering community input, no matter where and when you engage in an artist in a public art process, it's really great and important to gather input and to engage the community. So where are the opportunities for public art and infrastructure? We talked about some of the definitions earlier, but I'm going to share a number of images with you to get you thinking about the possibilities in your community. So this is a mural project on a board that was installed at the Greensboro Bend Lamoille Valley Rail Trailhead. So but are there utility boxes in your community that could be painted or wrapped? Are there fences that could be built or treated by an artist? Are there gathering places like parks and empty lots that could use some artwork in it? Are there tree grates in your new streetscape plan? Perhaps those could be designed and built by an artist. How about a baseball backstop with an artist creating that piece of the infrastructure? Planters in your community, some have seasonal features and maybe they could be artist designed and put out there in your community. Bike racks. Some communities have bike racks in the city, and other places they could be artfully created and installed as well. Water features. Are you doing a water feature in your new park? How about integrating an original artist design into that feature? If you're working on architecture and buildings, how about a floor? Could be artfully designed floor. Walls or windows provide opportunities as well. Sidewalks. These are a couple of projects of pictures of projects that we funded in Middlebury. Poetry in the Sidewalk project, and then down in Brattleboro, some small murals around stormwater drains to draw attention to the role of and the importance of these stormwater drains. Obviously, if you have a blank wall, we get a lot of mural applications, but these are some possible ideas. Blank walls provide opportunities. Maybe a bench. Do you need a bench in your community? How about a unique one or some fire pits or other types of things? They could be very different and unique as well. Some aesthetic treatments that are temporary, lighting or just yarn bombing type projects have been done. Those are different things. This was an installation at the Fleming Museum by a local artist. Community art making or competitions, thinking about winter in those spaces. What could you do in the winter in those spaces and really activate them as well? Experiential elements we talked about, light parades, performances, other things, lots of potential there. Interactive elements, for example, this bridge in Montpelier was one of the early pilot projects they did in Montpelier, that the lights would change color when pedestrians walked across the bridge, and that actually ended up kind of moving on and building toward Montpelier. Just this year did a big bridge illumination project where they illuminated 7 bridges in their community, so in the downtown. So those are just a few ideas to kind of get you thinking. And then just thinking about where to begin, I would say, first of all, identify your goals. What's your focus want to be? Is it on the community engagement? Is it on planning? Is it on pedestrian safety? Do you want to address community vibrancy? Are people needing physical activity? Do you want to get people out and active? Just think about what are those community goals that you would like to address. And then ask yourself, how can I add value to an existing infrastructure or other community project through the artwork here? And then choose a project that's right for your community and of the right scope and scale. Small and temporary is often a way that people start these kinds of projects in community, because it can demonstrate to people the potential. It gets people excited, could build momentum and excitement, And so you don't have to necessarily start off big. And then select a project or team and cross-sector partners that includes a diversity of talents. And cross-sector partnerships are really key to successful creative placemaking. And then find those opportunities to involve an artist from the beginning or as early as possible. So how do you find an artist? Well, some of you may be working with an artist in your community already, and that's fine. We don't require that you do a call to artists, but if you haven't got an artist lined up and you want to put out a call to artists, there's a couple of ways that you could think about that. The first one is what we call a request for qualifications. And when you're doing a request for qualifications, this is a little bit more like posting a job opportunity where you've identified the project and the goals, and you ask artists to respond with a letter of interest, a resume, and images of their past work. And you might get, let's say you get 20 proposals of qualifications. Um, what we do in our processes here for some of our other public art programs is we then narrow that list down to a small number of finalists. And then we invite them to come to the site to learn a little bit more about the process. And we provide them with an honorarium to develop a real, very, very basic kind of conceptual idea in a and that provides a way for the committee that you've identified to get a sense of how they work, how they think, what their approach to the project might be. And so we do provide honorariums for that. And I do encourage you to provide honorariums because we really want to compensate for artists to do the work. If you do the request for proposals route, which is certainly a legitimate way to do it, many communities have. However, it often is artists are doing all of the work right up front to develop the idea, the proposal, the project, and doing, putting all the budget together, all that design work for no compensation. And we're really trying to get communities to think about compensating artists, even if it is for just an honorarium to kind of come in, have them come and talk to you and think about some concepts. And then if you do a request for qualifications and do it that way, what we do is when we have our finalists, let's say 3 to 5 finalists, they come, then we give them the honorarium, they come back to us, excuse me, with those concepts, then we will select an artist or a team of artists to actually do the design work. And that's where, so for example, if you have your design grant, you could do a $3,000 design grant for a smaller project and then provide those honorariums to your four finalists, say, to for the grant funds. So those are just there's so many different ways you could kind of do this, but that's one common way we've done things here. And that way, that design grant, then the artist is compensated for really digging in, working collaboratively with the community, figuring out all the exact materials, the dates, the plans, any kind of structural needs about the project. So then if you want to to promote that call to artists, there's a number of ways you could do that. You can share it with your local arts organizations in your community. Some communities use front porch forums, local libraries, other community gathering spaces or places, social media. The Vermont Arts Council does have a classified ad section, and we have call to artists in there, and that gets distributed statewide to Vermont artists all over. So I encourage you there. Local newspapers or other media, you could promote a call to artists there, also by invitation. And then if you are looking for artists, the New England Foundation for the Arts has what's called the Creative Ground directory, and that if you go to our website, we have our arts directory is the Creative Ground website. So you could link in and find Vermont artists in there as well as New England-wide artists if you are looking for artists. So all right, we're getting close to the end here, almost done. So artists as contributors, again, they are a contributing part of your project. They're local small businesses. They need to be supported for their time and creative skills and interpretations that they can bring to each idea and site. So it's really important that you compensate them. Just as you would plan to pay for an artist, an architect or a plumber or another consultant on your project, you should plan for and budget to pay your artist. So funding, however you find your artists, um, when you're thinking about the budget, match your budget to your community. Be creative and think big, but be realistic about what you think your community will support. Talk to some artists who have done similar projects just to develop an understanding of a realistic idea for a preliminary budget. You can do a lot of things in almost any price range, depending on the materials, the amount of labor, whether it's temporary or permanent. And the project doesn't have to be big or expensive to meet your goals. And then find creative ways to cut costs. As I mentioned before, do you have an existing budget for a fence or a floor or benches that are built into a project for some infrastructure project in your community? Can you give that amount over to an artist or add it to another budget to use those funds to integrate art into the functional components of your project? Or your partners. If you're working with a diverse group of partners on your project, they may be able to contribute as well by donating funds. Sometimes it's materials or other services. Or you could set up a crowdfunding campaign. The more community excitement that you can generate around a project, the more likely that crowdfunding campaign could be successful. Um, and then some other sources I put in here, Vermont Community Foundation, and there's Spark grants and some other grants, National Endowment for the Arts, the Our Town grant, and the Better Places program at the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development has not yet been funded this year. They've run out of funds, and given the financial strains, I'm not sure that it will get funding, but I just listed it there because it is a resource that some communities have used in the past. So we should keep our eye on the process in the legislature if that gets funded again. Also, I did mention if you do have a smaller project, the Arts Council does have arts project grants. Those are grants of up to $4,000. You can't get funding in both categories for the same project, but if you have another project that you want to, a different project that you want to apply for, you are welcome to apply in that category. And I will be doing a Grantseeker workshop in a couple of weeks for that program. So all in all, if you, stay positive and enthusiastic. Anytime you're doing any kind of public project, whether it's public art, putting in a new sidewalk or water system or putting up, anything in a community, there's bound to be some pushback from the public. And I've found that if projects are done with a lot of community engagement and are you looking for opportunities for public input, that they're more likely to be positive feedback than negative. One of our very first projects that we did in the town of Jeffersonville, there was a lot of community pushback about some murals they wanted to do on these old silos that were in an empty lot in their community. And they stuck with it. They got community input. They had the artists work in the community to develop the designs. And now they, then once it was all up, Art Saves the Day was the headline. So, it's just keep with it. And I will, I've heard from a lot of communities, and I know from myself and working in projects that sometimes things take a lot more time and energy than you think they might, but they're definitely worth it in the end. So hang in there. And your community, your enthusiasm will be contagious in your community. So keep at it. So I'm going to stop there and open it back up for questions for the room, as for whatever people might have. If we have any more questions. Thank you, Beck, for putting those other things in. Let me just go back here.
We've got a question from Susan in the chat.
Yes, do artists need to be Vermont residents? No, we don't require that. We encourage Vermont, hiring of Vermont artists, but we don't require it. There's a few projects in here that did hire other artists from other parts of the state, like this one here, even Sarah Rutherford in this project that you're seeing here, she has a lot of ties to the community, but she lives over I think at the time, maybe lived in New York State or something. So there's not a requirement there, whatever works for your community. So I think I'm gonna just stop sharing so I can see all of you now if there's any other questions and open it up.
I don't have a question. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to back up what you said about maybe doing a request for qualifications as opposed to a request for proposal. Um, for those other participants who might be thinking, well, I'd really like to see what somebody has in mind. The incredible amount of labor that just goes into putting together a rudimentary proposal can be an entire day. And so if you're asking, let's say you don't know how many people are going to apply.
Nope. I think we lost you, Alexi. Is everyone else still there or am I frozen up? You can hear me? Okay. Oh, we lost you. Well, yes, I think to his point, that providing at least an honorarium, and we're trying to increase our honorariums as we grow the program in some of our other areas, just to support those artists in taking the time to even just kind of think about a concept and to share it. It does take a lot of energy and time, so I encourage you to do it that way if you can. But and I also am available to talk to you about your project and maybe review a call to artists at some point if you want a draft. I can help look at a draft as well. Oh, Alexa, you're back. You cut
Yeah,
off.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
I did I disappear?
You did. You froze. Your screen froze, and then you disappeared. We got through the whole. You were just finishing up saying that artists can take a whole day to just put together a rudimentary concept, and that just to compensate them even a little bit is better than nothing. And I mean, I'm kind of putting that. That's the way I was starting to finish your sentence, but that's where we ended up.
Right. Yeah, yep. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to back up that point because I think that's an important point to make. Yep. That's all. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Anyone else have any questions or projects they want to share? Or I'm happy to, talk we can on the phone about your specifics too, but just thought while you're here, if anyone wants to share anything or ask anything. No? All right. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. No hands being raised. So we can let you go about your day and we will, if you know of other people who wanted to attend this, we're going to post this recording on our website in probably in next week. It will be there for people who couldn't attend so that they can share in this. So good luck with everything you're thinking about. If you're going to do a project, that's great. And we will end our workshop here. So thank you all. Have a great day.